رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على الإمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين، الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى آل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قد قال مولانا علي بن أبي طالب لمالك ابن الحارث الأشتر في عهده إليه: فإنهم صنفان، إما أخ لك في الدين أو نذير لك في الخلق. صدق مولانا علي بن أبي طالب سلام الله عليه. For the protection of the believers wherever in the world they may be, and for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have been blessed with a number of documents that are unparalleled when analyzed comparatively to other texts within that subject. For example, when one goes to the realm of supplication and spirituality, a subject which is even discussed by those who don't believe in organized religion, they recognize that spirituality is something which is needed within the life of a human being. When you analyze the text within that field, you'll begin to realize that the supplications of Imam Zainul Abidin and Sahifa as-Sajjadiyah stand in a class of its own. Further than that, if you take another subject which is completely different, for example, when you go towards the field of medicine and you look at those medical document and text available within the time period of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and you compare that to the tib of our 8th Imam, Imam al-Rida, his medical dissertation, you'll find that the findings within that medical dissertation are truly groundbreaking for that time period. As in when Ma'mun, he saw this dissertation, he ordered that it be written in gold, thus it was famously known as the Ar-Risala al-Dhahabiyya, the Golden Treatise. And further than that, when you go into the realm of social administration within politics and social interaction for a human being, one document of Ahlul Bayt that comes to mind is letter 53 of Nahjul Balagha, or letter 54 depending on which version you have, in which Amir al-Mu'mineen writes his famous letter to Malik al-Ashtar when Malik was appointed as the governor of Egypt. Now when you analyze this letter, you'll find that this letter has a profound insight within it. And it's relevant within today's society when people are discussing that how should a leader of a country uphold himself? That what is the role of government within the life of a human being? But the sad reality is that when it comes to many of our texts, we haven't done justice towards those texts. As in, I remember that what Shaheed Murtaza Mutahiri would say about Nahjul Balagha. He would say, when I was younger, my relationship with Nahjul Balagha was like this. Is that imagine that one day you're within your neighborhood and you see a person, he walks by. Then you see him another day, that you see this person every single day on a daily basis, but you never speak to that person. You don't know what he's like. But one day you see that individual, he's sitting by himself. And when he's sitting by himself, you go and you speak to him. You realize that this is a delightful individual. This is a person I can build a connection with. And when you begin to speaking with him, you realize that there is a bond between you two which you never realized. Shaheed Murtaza Mutahiri says that my relationship with Nahj al-Balagha was like this, that I would see it in the bookshelf of my father, but the moment I picked it up and began reading and analyzing it, I found a connection with this document. And you know, the Quran, it echoes the same idea. You know, today is what? The day of Jum'ah just passed, and it's mustahab on the day of Jum'ah that even if you don't attend Salat al-Jum'ah, to recite Surah al-Jum'ah. Within this chapter, the 62nd chapter of the Quran, in the 5th verse, what is the example within that verse? It says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلَ التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا. The example of those who are entrusted with the Torah, but they fail to carry its weight, is like a donkey who carries books. That asfar is the plural of sifar. Sifar is a book which contains the reality of creation. You find that this verse, it gives a warning to the Jews that despite having the reality of the coming of Rasulullah, as the Quran says, they knew Rasulullah like they would know their own children, they rejected his position. But at the second side, you find that this is a warning for the Muslims, that when you have the Quran, don't neglect the Quran. Don't just make it a book for nikah or when somebody passes away, because this book isn't part of just a wedding sigha, nor is this a book for the dead. Rather, this is a book to solve your day-to-day problems. And in the way that you find that you shouldn't neglect the Quran is samit, the text of the Quran natiq, the speaking, the walking Qurans, the Ahlul Bayt, are something which are worth analyzing as well. And in order to build that understanding, as many of you have already presumed, the topic of tonight's majlis is the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar. In order that we can begin to understand this document, and in order that we can begin to understand the Islamic vision through the lens of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That when Amir al-Mu'mineen is called Aynullah, why is Amir al-Mu'mineen called Aynullah? Allah, of course, literally doesn't have eyes, as all of you within this hall know, but rather the eyes, it symbolizes a vision. That if you want to know what Allah's vision for a perfect society is, if you want to know what Allah's vision for a perfect human being, an insan al-kamil is, then go and look at Ali ibn Abi Talib and you'll begin to understand what that vision is. But the question arises is that why is this document out of all of the sermons in Nahj al-Balagha worth analyzing? Because when you have a book, right, there's the introduction of the book. And within the introduction, it is the job of the author to sell his book to the reader why you should keep reading in the muqaddimat, in the intro. So why is this letter important? Number one, you find that the subject of social administration, of how a leader should be, what is the role of government in the lives of its subjects, is something which has historically always been discussed. As in when you look at theories, democracy, republic, you find Marx came up with a theory, communism, these were all theories on how a government should be run, and this is something which was historically discussed. But even today, when you find with the recent election that just has passed, it's on the minds of the people, that how should a leader within society be, and you find that this letter, it sheds light upon this subject. But at the second level, it's not just limited to those who are within positions of social administration. Rather, if you're in any type of profession, this is relevant towards you. No, rather, I'll make it more general. If you run a household, it's relevant to you. No, even more generalized. If you are a human being who has social interaction, you can benefit from this letter. And you find within the fitrah of a human being, we've been created as social beings. So you find this is the second benefit. But at the third benefit, you find that this is one of those excellent documents that you can present towards the world, towards non-Muslims and outreach about what the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam are like, what our ideology is. Because when many people, they look within society, they see that Islamophobia is a reality, that there is negative rhetoric towards Islam. But the fact of the situation is, this is something which has historically been there, it's nothing new. When you look at 17th and 18th century society, you look within Europe, even within America, you find within that time period, one of the greatest insults was to call an individual a Muslim. That the first American figure to be called a Muslim as part of a smear campaign was Thomas Jefferson. Because within that time period, you find Islam was the antithesis to Protestant Christianity. That Rasulullah, na'udhu billah, was viewed as the Antichrist. So you find it was something which was all there. But what is different between then and now is that now we have the individuals to go out and to create that change within society. And this letter is one of those documents that you can present. Because when you look at this letter, a number of politicians have testified to the glory of the content in this letter. That you look at somebody like Ranjiv Gandhi. Ranjiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India from 1984 to 1989. Ranjiv Gandhi would give this letter to each of his ministers that follow the example within this letter. More famously, you look farther than that. In 2002, in an Arab Human Development Report, Kofi Annan, within this report, he mentions that I am surprised that there is so much anarchy within the Middle East when they have the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the government of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he famously states within this report, which you can find online, that this letter is the greatest letter of government ever written by a human being. That's a strong statement right there, that this is the greatest letter ever written by a human being in the realms of government. And you find that this discussion today will take place upon four premises. Number one, who was Malik al-Ashtar? And how can we learn from Malik on how to be companions of the Imam of our time? Number two, what does this letter mention about how the demeanor of a leader of society should be? And how did we practically see this within the government of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Number three, when the famous line from this letter says, people are of two types, either they are your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity, what was the need to differentiate the two? Why mention one brotherhood and then mention humanity? And what is the Islamic concept of brotherhood? And number four, what are other aspects from this letter that we can derive lessons from and apply within our lives? So this discussion will be based on these four premises. Now, when it comes to analysis of this letter, or analysis of any document, you analyze it according to the context which is in. And when you look at the context of this document, you find that Amir al-Mu'mineen is writing to Malik al-Ashtar, and right off the bat, this sheds some light about the status of Malik. How? Because there's a famous narration of Rasulullah, and the Imams have narrated this as well, where Rasulullah says, تَقَلَّبَ النَّاسَ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ, that speak to the people at the level of their intellects. Now when Ali ibn Abi Talib within this letter is speaking to Malik at this level, and he's explaining to Malik the intricacies of society at this level, it goes to show that Malik was an individual who was capable of understanding these intricacies. And it shows that Malik had a special connection with the Imam. As in, if you want to know who Malik al-Ashtar is, the fact is that Malik was the commander of the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And within that time period of the Arabs, this was a great honor. Why? Because the commander of the army was the one who was the closest towards the individual who appointed them. That the commander, he represented the movements of his leader. That he echoed what the leader wanted ideologically. That's why when you look within the time period of Rasulullah, who was the commander of the army of Rasulullah? It was Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. And it's about And it's about that Ali Rasulullah would say, I am the sun and Ali is the moon. That why would Rasulullah say this? Because when you look at the sun, you find that the sun is the original source of light, and the moon, it reflects the light of the sun. In the same way, Rasulullah is the light of guidance, and there is no better reflection of Rasulullah than Ali ibn Abi Talib. And in the same way, you find that when the sun is not there, you take light from the moon. When Ali is not there, when Rasulullah is not there, you take light from the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen. That this is how Amir al-Mu'mineen, he echoed the one who appointed him as the commander of his army. And in the same way, you find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would view Malik al-Ashtar. That when you look at letter 38 of Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says about Malik, he says that when Malik commands you of the truth, listen to him. فَإِنَّهُ سَيْفٌ مِّن سُيُوفِ اللَّهِ, for he is a sword from amongst the swords of Allah, whose edge does not become dull, and neither does he miss his target. When he tells you to advance, advance. When he tells you to stay, stay. When he tells you, neither does he attack, nor does he advance, nor does he move anyone backward. وَلَا يُؤَخِّرُ وَلَا يُقَدِّمُ إِلَّا عَنْ أَمْرِي, nor does he move anyone backward, nor does he move anyone forward except by my command. That this is Malik. Malik is that individual that when he would move by the command of the Imam of his time. And that's the supreme example which we take from Malik. That you want to be followers of the Imam of our time, you make your movements what the Imam would want. And that happens through having marifat of the Imam. And that is what Malik he represented. That who was this Malik? Continuing on, that you look at his whole name, it is Malik ibn al-Harith al-Nakha'i al-Ashtar. That when it's al-Nakha'i, it signifies that he is from the Nakha tribe of Yemen. Because you look, a number of individuals, they became Muslim due to the blessings of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Yemen. Rasulullah, he sends Khalid bin Walid to Yemen and a couple other companions. He says to them, preach Islam. 1 month goes by, nobody becomes Muslim. 2 months, nobody becomes Muslim. 3, 4, 5, 6 months go by, nobody comes towards Islam. Rasulullah calls him back, he sends Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know what Amir al-Mu'mineen does in Yemen? He gives 2 sermons. He gives 1 sermon after Fajr. Within that 1 sermon, he converted the biggest tribe of Yemen, the tribe of Hamadan. They come towards the path of Islam. The second sermon, those who were remaining, he gives that sermon. The rest of the people of Yemen, they come towards Islam. And you find from amongst those people of Yemen, there were a number of companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And one of those was Malik al-Ashtar, for example. Another was Qumail ibn Ziyad al-Naqai. And those individuals, they held a special connection with Ali ibn Abi Talib for this reason. That they realized they came to the folds of Islam because of this man. We will attach ourselves towards this man. And this is what Malik did. Despite, even before Amir al-Mu'mineen becoming caliph, you find Malik, he wasn't an individual who was young or at full strength. That when you look at his name, Al-Ashtar, why is he called Ashtar? He's called Ashtar because in the battle of Yarmouk, somebody struck the bottom eyelid of Malik and his eye was damaged. But despite this, Malik showed a bravery which was unparalleled. And withholding this bravery, you find Malik, despite this, he had a level of purity with him which shows how the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib should be. You know, one day Malik, he's walking through the streets of Kufa. There's a man, he sees Malik. Malik was a little bit darker complexion. He sees Malik. He throws a date seed at Malik al-Ashtar. Malik, he goes away. Somebody says to him, do you know what you've just done? He says, what? There was a person with a dark complexion walking by. His clothing was that of the poor. I threw a date seed at him. The man says, you just threw a date seed at the commander of the army of the Khalifa Ali ibn Abi Talib. That is Malik al-Ashtar. The man, he begins to panic at that moment. I just threw a date seed at arguably one of the most powerful people in the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, I have to go find Malik. That when he's asking around, where is Malik? They say that Malik is within Masjid al-Kufa. He goes within Masjid al-Kufa. He sees that Malik is praying. He waits for Malik to finish praying. He says to Malik, oh Malik, please forgive me. I didn't know who you were. Now this man was speaking about the worldly position of Malik. If he recognized his spiritual position as a confidant of Ali ibn Abi Talib, what that man, he wouldn't have done it within the first place. But he says, oh Malik, forgive me, I didn't recognize who you were. Malik says, the reason I came to this mosque is to recite a 2-rakat prayer on your behalf for forgiveness. That this is Malik. That when it comes to companionship with the Imam, there are 2 levels. Number 1, that you need ability and skills as well. You need administrative skills. You need educational skills. But at the same level, you need a level of purity as well. Because when the Imam is implementing his government, he needs individuals who will go by his command. He needs individuals whom he can trust around him. And this is what Malik had. That you look on the battle of Siffin. On the day of Siffin, Malik was 1 row away from Muawiyah with his sword. That who is Muawiyah? Muawiyah, the greatest, arguably the greatest enemy of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You find Malik is going through the lines. He comes towards the tent of Muawiyah with his sword outside of that tent. But at that moment a man comes. It says what? He says, oh Malik, Ali is telling you to return. At that moment, Malik has a battle within his heart. Malik's mind and his emotions are telling him that Muawiyah is in front of me. But at the other side, my master Ali has told me to come back. That this was the moment of the test of Malik. And within your life, you'll face similar tests. That there will be time periods when you'll want to move forward, but your mind will think that Ahlul Bayt, they wouldn't want me to move forward in that direction. But the moment you overcome that test, you find that you'll find blessings in your lives which you wouldn't even imagine. You know, our 6th Imam, you look in Usul al-Kafi, the narration is there. He says, none understands our narrations except for the prophets or the closest angels or that believer who has been tested. The moment you go through tests, you'll find your ma'rifat of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, it will begin to increase, and that's the blessings of going upon that test. And that's what Malik did. Because one Malik was enough for Ali ibn Abi Talib. You know, there was a man after the battle of Siffin. He was going from Kufa to Sham. He's upon his camel, which is a he-camel. The man from Sham comes up to him. He says, give me your she-camel. He says, it's my she-camel. Why would I give it towards you? He says, no, give me the she-camel, or I'm going to take this towards Muawiyah. They go within the court of Muawiyah. You know what that individual does? He brings 50 witnesses. The man from Sham saying it was his, what? It was his she-camel. At that point, the other man from Kufa says, you have gathered 50 false witnesses, but the reality is that this is a male camel, whereas all your witnesses are testifying it's a female camel. Thus you're lying. You know what Muawiyah says at that moment? Muawiyah says, I am the leader. What are you going to do about it? Everybody, they leave that court. After that, Muawiyah, he sends money towards the man from Kufa. He says, come over here. The man, he comes. He says, when you return to Kufa, tell Ali ibn Abi Talib that I have 100,000 men ready to fight him who are not even ready to differentiate between a male camel and a female camel. Meaning that this is how blindly they will follow me. You know what that man replies by saying? He says, oh Muawiyah, you have spread your seeds, but Ali is also training this defensive beast, this defensive animal. His name is Malik al-Ashtar, and Malik will devour those seeds which you have planted, O Muawiyah. that one Malik was enough for everyone else. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen would say what? He would say, take 10 of mine, give me one of Muawiyah's. Why? Because Muawiyah's individuals, they would blindly follow, whereas his would question. But those 10 which he was willing to send, it didn't include Malik al-Ashtar, because Malik was an ummah by himself. And that is why at the death of Malik, you find that Amir al-Mu'mineen was aggrieved like no other. That, you know, Malik, he was appointed as the governor of Egypt. Why? At that time period, Muawiyah, he wanted to take over Egypt when Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was the governor of Egypt. So he sends Amr bin As with 6,000 troops towards Egypt. Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, he writes towards Amir al-Mu'mineen that sends somebody to solidify the areas and be the governor of over here. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he sends Malik al-Ashtar. But Malik, he never reaches Egypt. In the way over there, they would have these different oases, as we see. They would have different stops. At one of those rest stops, they had given poison to Malik, and Malik, he passes away. But what attention I'm trying to bring to this point is that when Malik, he passes away, you know what Muawiyah said? Muawiyah said, now I have cut both the arms of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I killed Ammar bin Yasir at the battle of Siffin, and now I have killed Malik al-Ashtar. That Malik was recognized as the arm of Ali. Within that expression, the arm, it signifies work, that it signifies somebody who is ready to carry out the task. Malik was ready to carry out the task which was sent by the Imam, which was sent by his wali. And this is why at the death of Malik, Amir al-Mu'mineen would say what? He would say, according to one version, that if Malik was a mountain, nobody would be higher than Malik. The birds, they cannot reach to Malik. But according to another version, he says what? He says, Malik, who is Malik? If Malik was a stone, he would be hard. If Malik was a rock, he would be unparalleled. The women had become barren to give birth to an individual like Malik. But then after that, he says one line about Malik. You know, I could keep talking about Malik for 2-3 hours, but this one line is enough. And I sit there and sometimes I try to fathom this line and the greatness of this line. Amir al-Mu'mineen says about Malik what? He says, Kana li kama kuntu li Rasulillah. That Malik was to me as I was to Rasulullah. That this line, the greatness of this line is on a different level. That Malik is to me as I was to Rasulullah. What was Ali to Rasulullah? Ali was the greatest defender of Rasulullah. Malik, he held that title within the heart of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this is why when somebody has that level of love with Ahlul Bayt, they share to them their secrets. And one of the secrets of social interaction is found within this letter. Because you find Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he writes to Malik, he explains to Malik how a leader of society should be, how the rhetoric and the demeanor of the leader of society should be, how should he behave with his subjects. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen say to Malik? That in the very beginning of this letter, he says, "O Malik, break your heart off, break your nafs off from the passions and restrain yourself when those passions, they increase. فَإِنَّ نَفْسَ أَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ اللَّهُ." Because that animalistic nafs, it leads one towards evil except for the one whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon. That Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's highlighting to Malik that before you begin to lead society, you must be able to free yourself. You know, there's a difference between the Islamic concept of freedom and the Oriental concept of freedom. Within Islam, you find Islam wants you to be completely free from your passions which are within you, from those that hinder your intellect. That the moment you can conquer yourself, you'll begin to see that you'll create a change within society. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen would say that the biggest enemy of you is you yourself. that oftentimes there's nothing holding you back, there's no strings holding you back, but you yourself are holding you back. And the moment you conquer that nafsul ammaratun bisu, you find that you'll begin to advance. And this is what Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Malik. He says, "Oh Malik, that if you want to lead society, you must be an individual who is logical, who is progressive yourself. And there is no individual who gave a better example of this than Amir al-Mu'mineen within his own government." That you look at Ali ibn Abi Talib, that when Amir al-Mu'mineen he would administer within the time of his caliphate, there was the famous saying of his, what? He would say that Ali has divorced this world 3 times and there is no returning back towards this world. You know, I remember a scholar, he would say that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he divorced this world 3 times, and you don't marry the divorcee of your Mawla Ali ibn Abi Talib. Because if she was worth it, Amir al-Mu'mineen would have taken her, but he divorced her, thus she isn't worth it. But you find within his caliphate, he would show this ideal of not having self-interest, not having interest within his own businesses as a leader of society, rather his interest with society and the reformation of society itself. And this is why you find that reformation was the only reason why Ali ibn Abi Talib, he held the caliphate valuable. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he takes these shoes out. These sandals, they're ripped apart, they're broken. He says to Ibn Abbas, "Ibn Abbas, how much are these sandals worth?" Ibn Abbas says they're worth nothing. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "These sandals which are worth nothing to you, they are more valuable to me than this khilafat, except for the fact that I can do right with this khilafat and I can take away from evil with this khilafat." This is that practical example of the government of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Continuing along, what else does Amir al-Mu'mineen say to Malik? Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Malik, "Oh Malik," he's speaking about the common man. He sees what? He says that the common man is the pillar of the religion. He is the strength of the Muslims. He is what? He is the defender of society from the enemies. Your leaning towards should be towards the common man, and your inclination should be towards the common man. That, you know, you can't have a leader who is untouched with what the majority of society wants, only serving the interests of the top 1%, as you watch a middle class slowly begin to fade away. This is not what leadership is. Amir al-Mu'mineen highlights to Malik something 1400 years ago roughly, that what your focus in society should be is the common everyday working individual. They are that force which can create change within society. And this is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, he highlighted this, that when you see Amir al-Mu'mineen, the clothes he would wear, his lifestyle, it would reflect the poor, the common individual of society. You know, they come up towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. There was a man, he comes from out of town, he was a Jewish man. He says that I have a complaint. They say to him, okay, that somebody from the government, they'll take it up. They take that man, as they're going, they see that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's laying underneath a tree. He says, who is that? They say, that is the Khalifa. He thinks to himself that that is the Khalifa of the Muslimin, that man who is sitting under the tree. He says, can I speak towards him? Can I file my complaint towards him? They say, yes, you can. When he goes over there, he says what? He says, "Oh Ali, who are you, oh Ali? That you don't have anyone defending you. You lay like this by yourself." Then he says what? He says, "It is because of your justice towards anyone that you are comfortable at this moment." That Amir al-Mu'mineen, his justice was at another level, that even the poor of the society and the common man of the society, they weren't ready to harm Amir al-Mu'mineen. And it shows how low the character of the individual who struck Ali ibn Abi Talib was, that if the common man wasn't ready to strike him, how lowly must this individual be? You find continuing along this letter, what does Amir al-Mu'mineen say to Malik? He says, "O Malik, when you employ ministers, don't employ a minister who was part of an evil regime before you, who served an evil individual before you." Why? He says, because you can find others like them in influence and views who do not share like them in sin and vices. That when you make a cabinet around you, don't make the cabinet with friends, with individuals you have business interests with. Rather, the reality is that those individuals whom you put around you, they should be of people of character. And once again, I go back to the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen, because anytime you want to see a theory, you find that positive theory, the practical, is Ali ibn Abi Talib. That you look at Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? He becomes Khalifa. When he becomes Khalifa, he begins speaking. He says that anyone who has unjustly taken from the Baytul Mal, I will take that wealth back. And anybody who has gotten used to this lifestyle, I will change that lifestyle. Even to the extent that even if any of your fathers paid your mother's dowry with the money from the Baytul Mal, I will take that money back. That people, they began to think to themselves that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali, he's giving a political sermon. He can't possibly act like this, because if he acts like this, who can live within a society like this? But you find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he did exactly that. That he disappointed all of those individuals. That he took away from power all of those individuals who were from the oppressive regimes before him, and he brought truth back to its position. You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he becomes Khalifa, right? He's walking towards the mimbar. And when the other individuals would sit on the mimbar, they would sit on different positions. That Rasulullah, he would sit on the top. The first would sit one step lower than Rasulullah. The second would sit one step lower than the first. The third would sit one step lower than the second. Now Ali is walking up to the mimbar. They think to themselves that Ali is going to take that spot all the way on the bottom of the mimbar. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he steps on the mimbar. He places his foot where the third would sit. Then he climbs up. He places his foot where the second would sit. Then he climbs up. He places his foot where the first would sit. Then he sits where Rasulullah would sit, and he would say, now today truth has come back to its position. That this is Amir al-Mu'mineen, his government, it brought back that truth, it brought back the rights of how a government should be within the Islamic theory. And this is that fact which you find Amir al-Mu'mineen is highlighting to Malik. What else does the Imam say to Malik? He says, "O Malik, that make yourself free to the poor people to listen to their complaints. And when you sit with them in humility for the sake of the Creator who has created you. That the leader should be in touch with what is going on with society." And the same for the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen would say that the one who understands his time will not be confused by the happenings of his time. That when you understand your time period and you see certain situations arising, due to that understanding, you know why, and you have the foresight to understand why this is happening. And this is how the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam should be, and this is how the leaders of society should be. But you find that Amir al-Mu'mineen, as he mentions line after line within the sermon, he comes to one line, that this one line is enough for humanity. He says to Malik what? He says, فَإِنَّهُمْ صِنْفَانِ إِمَّا أَخٌ لَكَ فِي الدِّينِ أَوْ نَذِيرٌ لَكَ فِي الْخَلْقِ. He says, "O Malik, know that the people are of two types. Either they are your brothers in faith or they are your equals in humanity." That if you live life by this principle, you'll begin to see that you'll have a more positive world around you. That either you give somebody the right of brotherhood or you give them the right of equality within humanity. But the question that comes up within the inquisitive mind of a person is that why does Amir al-Mu'mineen differentiate the group? As in, is there a difference between equality and the Islamic concept of brotherhood? And you find the Quran, it highlights the same point. When you look within chapter 49, verse 10, it says what? It says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Indeed, the believers are brothers. Why doesn't it say all of society is brothers? You find that the reality is that brotherhood is the closest bond between two individuals. That it's even closer than parenthood, even though being a parent and a son, a parent and a daughter is the more powerful relation, you find brotherhood is closer. Why? Because within a parent and a child, they're not on the same level. One is supposed to command, the other is supposed to listen. But when you are two brothers, you are on that equal platform. That brotherhood is a representation of unity. And when you have something like Islam, we don't build brotherhoods out of formality. Rather, our brotherhood is a goal, and that goal is Allah. That goal is the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Because if you have individuals with different ideologies, for example, if you take a political party, one is far left, one is far right within the same party, what's going to happen? The moment one argument comes up, it'll fall apart. In the same way, when you have the Islamic concept of brotherhood, everyone is in unison, they're revolving around the same axis. That when you look at the Shuhada of Karbala, although there were 72 bodies, in reality they were one soul which was revolving around that axis known as Hussein ibn Ali. That 72 bodies, one soul, revolving around the axis of Hussein ibn Ali, and that is that unity which they had. And that's why for the advancement of society within our communities, that we can't let little fights, little debates, little things split us apart. That if you want to be a society that moves forward, if you want to be a community that moves forward, you move forward through unity. You move forward by taking everyone with you, not leaving anyone behind. And that's why when Rasulullah, he migrates from Makkah to Medina, the first thing he did was he established brotherhood between those who migrated and the Ansar of Medina. That those who were similar minded, he would make them brothers of another. You would find that he would go down this line until Amir al-Mu'mineen would be seen crying. He would say, Ya Ali, why are you crying? Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, Ya Rasulullah, you made everyone the brothers of one another, but you didn't make any brother for me. Rasulullah says, Ya Ali, if any of them were like you, I would have made them your brother. But then he says, Ya Ali, anta akhi fid dunya wal akhirah. That you are my brother within this world and within the hereafter, O Ali. That Rasulullah, he highlights this point, and this example in history proves it. That the first thing you have to do before any other issue, before you worry about a new building or whatever, focus on the mu'mineen and bringing their hearts together so you can move forward. And this is the example of Ahlul Bayt. But you find that this example isn't the only example which you can derive from this letter. That within this letter there is line after line of wisdom which you can apply within your life. For example, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, O Malik, habituate your heart to mercy. Make mercy a habit of your heart. And don't stand over your subjects like greedy beasts who are ready to devour them. For they are of two types. Either they are your brothers in faith, or they are your equals in humanity. And O Malik, they will have slip-ups and they will make mistakes. They may act wrongfully, either on purpose or out of neglect. But when they do, forgive them in the way you would want Allah to forgive you. And then he says what? He says you are over them, whereas I am over you and Allah is over me. That when you look at these lines and the rhetoric within Nahj al-Balagha, you begin to realize why this is the peak of eloquence. That a non-Shia writer, Ibn Abil Hadid al-Mu'tazili, who in 20 volumes wrote a commentary about Nahj al-Balagha, he would describe Nahj al-Balagha by saying, Fawqa kalam al-bashar wa tahta kalam al-khaliq. That it is above the words of the creation, but it's less than the words of the Creator. That this is what you realize as you go through the sermons of Nahj al-Balagha. But within this sermon, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he highlights an important point. He says, O Malik, Forgive the people in the way you would want Allah to forgive you. You know, sometimes we say, Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu alayh, and we pray and we pray. But when somebody comes up towards us asking for forgiveness, we're not ready to forgive that individual, despite having the example of Ahlul Bayt. You know, our fourth Imam would say that if somebody insulted me in this year, and he asked for forgiveness in this year, I would accept the apology of that individual. That this is who Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam were. This is that example which they leave. But continuing in this letter, what other aspects of this letter do you find? You find Amir al-Mu'mineen would say to Malik, O Malik, do not repent of forgiving, nor be merciful in punishing. Don't act hastily in times of anger and hold yourself back if you can. Never say, I have been appointed and obey my command. For this creates confusion within the hearts. It weakens the religion and it takes you towards ruin. And O Malik, if you ever feel arrogant or pride about the position you are in, then look at the realm of Allah over you and look at the power of Allah which He has that you don't even have over yourself, O Malik. Look at that power which Allah has over you, which you don't even have over yourself. Try being a billionaire, multi-billionaire, but the moment one tumor comes within your body, oftentimes you can go from the east to the west searching for a cure. You can spend no matter how much dollars, it won't help you, because this is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Amir al-Mu'mineen highlights this point to Malik. But another aspect from this statement is what? Is that Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying to Malik that when you want to cure yourself of arrogance, there's a way towards doing this. And that way is looking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, when people are higher of you in social status, that if their business is better, if they're better in wealth, instead of looking at them through an eye of envy, look at them through the eye of humility. That Allah has blessed this individual, that, oh Allah, bless me as well to reach that stage one day so I can serve the community. And Amir al-Mu'mineen is highlighting this fact towards Malik, that when you look at those who are higher than you, do it for humility. And this is one of the many benefits which we get from reciting the fadail and the virtues of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, that no matter how great you think you are in terms of character or knowledge, you won't come close to the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That even if you start reciting 1,000 rakats of prayer a night, it won't bring you to the level of Amir al-Mu'mineen, because that status you can't attain. Then what else does the Imam say to Malik? He says to Malik, line after line, he says, O Malik, cover the faults of your subjects, and the farthest from you should be the one who is the most inquisitive of the faults of the people, and the one who should be the worst in your eyes is the one who is the most inquisitive of the faults of the people. Cover the faults of your subjects, and Allah will cover your faults from your subjects. That, you know, when a person passes away, right, there's a janazah. As you go around the janazah, what do you say? You say, Allahumma inna la na'lamu minhu illa khair. That I know nothing from this person except khair. And if it's a female, you use the feminine version of the Arabic, minha illa khair. You know, they asked Marhum Ayatullah al-Khu'i. They said to him, that what if you knew the person? That you knew he was a sinner, that you saw him do bad things. Do you still recite this? Do you still say this? Ayatullah Khu'i said that when you say this khair which you are testifying to is not their deeds, it is the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. But at the second level you find what? The narrations say that if 40 individuals circulating the body say this statement, Allah will say that look at the mu'mineen, they are covering the faults of that person. I am Sattarul Uyub, I am the concealer of faults. How can I not cover his faults? And Allah will forgive that individual. That this is the power of covering the faults of a human being. And we find this within this letter to Malik al-Ashtar. That what else can we find from this letter? That Amir al-Mu'mineen, he took care of every aspect of society. Within this letter he says to Malik, he says, oh Malik, even when you lead prayer, prayer, lead it in such a way that the weakest of society, they will not be burdened by that prayer. For I asked Rasulullah when he sent me to Yemen that how should I lead prayer? Rasulullah said, pray as the weakest of them would pray. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen, no detail when it came towards mercy and humility and humanity was so small for Amir al-Mu'mineen, that even when you lead prayer, look at the condition of the weakest. And this is who Ali ibn Abi Talib was. And you find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he wrote this to an individual like Malik. I know many people come to listen to the fadail of Ahlul Bayt and from these majalis. I'll mention this one thing and I'll come towards Masaib. It was the day of Siffin. That how Amir al-Mu'mineen came out on the day of Siffin. Ali ibn Abi Talib is walking. There's one young man on his left. There's one young man on his right. There's a young man in front of him holding the alam. There's a young individual who is behind him. The narrator says that I wanted to see how Ali would come out on the day of Siffin. I said to somebody next to me that who are those two individuals next to Ali that have this light coming from their face? The narrator says that is Hassan and Hussein. As if he couldn't tell from the husn, the beauty upon their faces, that is Hassan and Hussein. Then the narrator says, who is that young individual behind Ali? They say that is Muhammad al-Hanafiya. Then the narrator says, who is that one in front of Ali with that beauty upon his face? That he has this glory to his face. He has these eyes that would stop somebody in the middle of their track. He says that is Abu Fazl Abbas. Then they say, who is that man who is walking behind? His back is bent. He's using cloth to hold himself up. He has cloth upon his eyes so his eyebrows don't fall. They say to the narrator, that is who they call Malik al-Ashtar. And you find it was this day of Siffin that Ali would fight and Malik would fight. Amir al-Mu'mineen would kill someone, Malik would kill someone. In the middle of the battle, Malik, he says to Ali, he says, oh my master, we've killed the same number of people. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Malik, make it clear to everyone why you think this. Malik says, because every time you kill someone, you say Allahu Akbar. And by my count, you have said Allahu Akbar 70 times. And I have killed 70 individuals as well. The Imam says, oh Malik, there is a difference between whom I kill and whom you kill. You kill anyone who comes in front of you, oh Malik. But when I kill somebody, I look 70 generations down their lineage. And if there is somebody who is worthy of being guided within that lineage, I don't kill that individual. That this is that union between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Malik al-Ashtar. But this union, it can't happen without love, ma'rifat and action upon the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. But you know what the saddest reality is? That despite this level of humanity of Amir al-Mu'mineen, despite having this letter of social justice, that not only did they murder Amir al-Mu'mineen, they didn't even spare the children. No, they didn't even spare the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Zainab. If you thought about this line, even after this majlis is over, when you go home and you think about this line, this one line is enough for Masaib. And what's that line? Every Masaib you've listened to, it's because you heard about what happened at Karbala, you would cry. Zainab is the one who saw Karbala. Zainab saw Shimr sit on the chest. This is who Zainab is that, they were reciting Masaib in front of this one scholar. The one who was reciting the Masaib, he said, Dakhalat Zainab. Zainab has entered the court of Ibn Ziyad. He says, stop the Masaib. This one line is enough for Musibah. That Zainab has entered the court of somebody who drinks, that this is that Zainab. But when the real musibah of Zainab it began? The real musibah of Zainab it began at separation from her brother Hussein. Because this is that sister who every moment of her life was for Hussein. When Bibi Zainab was born, she would begin to cry. But then they would take a young Zainab towards Imam al-Hussein who was young. She would stop crying. Bibi Fatima, she would take that child away. She would start crying. Back towards Hussein, she would stop crying. She says to Rasulullah, oh my father, every time I take this child by Hussein, this child stops crying. But then I move this child away, it begins to cry. Rasulullah says, oh Fatima, this is Zainab, oh Fatima. This is that daughter of yours who will be with Hussein in Karbala. This is that daughter of yours who will be with Hussein in Karbala. That even on the day of Ashura, you know what wasiyah Zainab would make towards On and Muhammad? She would say, oh On. She would say, oh Muhammad, I know you are the grandchildren of Hadr Karrar. I know you are the grandchildren of Jafar al-Tayyar. I know your bravery. I know you'll reach the Furat. But when you reach the Furat, don't drink from the Furat until Sakina and Ali Asghar. These children, they fight when they fall upon the ground. One side Imam Hussein comes, the other side Hazrat Abbas comes. They say, do you have any final lines for your mother? One of them says to their uncles, that tell our mother, we fought the enemies, we reached the Furat. When we reached the Furat, we remember what she said. We didn't drink from the Furat because Ali Asghar and Sakina, because Ali Asghar and Sakina were thirsty. But this wasn't the musibah of Zainab. The musibah of Zainab, it began when the neck of Hussein was cut. It was Sham-e Ghariba. You know, that was a strange night. On one hand, Zainab would make dua for the night to end, for Sakina is being oppressed on this night. But on the other hand, Zainab would make dua for the night to continue. Why? For this was that night. This was the last thing which was covering the head of Zainab. After this, Zainab will go in the light of day without that hijab upon her head. You know, on the 11th of Muharram, that I'll recite these Masaib slowly so you can cry as you listen to the Masaib of al-Masaib. That on the 11th of Muharram, Zainab, she says to Shimar, oh Shimar, don't take us in between the bodies. What does Shimar do? He takes this caravan in between the bodies. You know, the women, they began to scatter, and the way the narration says, in the way a tasbih, it breaks and the beads, they scatter. That's how the bodies were scattered over the plains of Karbala. Each woman would go towards their beloved. One mother would say, oh Akbar. Another mother would say, oh Qasim. Kulthum would say, oh Abbas. But there were two women. They only went to the body of Imam al-Hussein. One was Rabab, the other was Zainab. You remember what the poet says? The poet says that Zainab took everything with her from Medina. But when she saw the body of her brother, she remembered that she didn't bring a kafan with her. That Zainab, she sees the body of her brother and she would repeat one line. She would say, Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Accept this sacrifice from us. Then she says, oh Bhaiya, oh brother, I want to kiss your body. But the entire body is covered in wounds. There's no spot to kiss her. This is that Zainab. From Kufa to Sham, Zainab was taken. Zainab would look at the cut head of her brother next to her. But one of the hardest moments was when Zainab entered the courtyard of Sham. Zainab didn't want anyone to recognize her within that courtyard. But the back of Zainab, it broke when Shimar announced who they were. Shimar says, Hadi Zainab bint Ali.
هذه أم كلثوم بنت علي, هذه سكينة بنت الحسين. You find Zainab is in the court. Zainab is in the court of Yazid. Yazid, he had a wife by the name of Hind. They say, oh Hind, there are some captives who were brought. Hind, she comes out towards the courtyard. When she comes towards the courtyard, she says to the captives that where are you from? They say, Nahanu min balad al-Madina, that we are from the city of Medina. She comes off the throne. She says, oh welcome, oh people of Medina. I used to serve in a house in Medina. Zainab, she says, oh Hind, which house did you serve in? She says, I used to serve in the house of Ali and Fatima. She says, oh Zainab, she says to Zainab, do you know anyone within that house? Zainab, she says back towards him, yes I do. Hind says, where is Hussein? Where is Abbas? How is Zainab? How is Kulthum? Zainab, she says to him, oh Hind, if you want to know where Hussein is, that is the cut head of Hussein, which your husband is poking at the teeth of. If you want to know where Abbas is, that is the cut head of Abbas. If you want to know where Zainab is, oh Hind, I am Zainab. Oh Hind, I am Zainab, and that is Kulthum. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. You know, it's stated in narrations that if you ask through the right of certain things, Allah will accept your dua. You know, Imam al-Zaman, he saw a scholar, he saw Imam al-Zaman in his dreams. He asked the Imam of our time, is there any message which you have for our Shia? The Imam said that whenever you pray for my reappearance, ask through the right of the hijab of my hands. For Allah doesn't reject that wasila. Ya Allah, we ask through the right of the hijab of Zainab, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are and they are being oppressed, Ya Allah, help them. Ya Allah, if any of the followers of Ahlul Bayt are sick and ailing, through the right of Imam Zainul Abidin, give shifa towards them. Ya Allah, help us progress within this society. Allow us to follow the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and give us the strength amongst this path. Ya Allah, we pray for the rebuilding of those broken graves within Jannatul Baqi. And Ya Allah, above all, we pray for the hastening of the master of our time, Imam al-Zaman. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. مات من حسين.